live on air. Just Jeff Schechter. Good to have you here, sir. We're going to start getting a bunch of people piled in here in a second. I'm going to go and get a hefty little drink over here. Remember, Shecky, for really the first 4 to 5 minutes as people just start loading on here, these people aren't watching live, so the first 4 or 5 minutes is really for the recording. So, Shecky, remember how last time you kind of helped update everybody, just kind of, hey, here are the topics, here's what we're going to be covering, and then Saturday we have a special webinar? I'm going to update those links here in just a second. Would you mind just kind of kicking everything off? Remember, for the first 3 or 4 minutes, whatever you say is going to be on the recording, but pretty much just like last time, so I can update the settings on the video so people can click on the links of what we're talking about. Do you mind?
I'm happy to do that, sir. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeff Schechter. Everybody calls me Shecky. I work directly with Kurt and Nick and the rest of the gang at Black Box. And we have been up to some really, really fun stuff the last, I don't know, few months actually. But it has been culminating in a very, very powerful training and coaching that is really addressing more of strategic and the psychological and brain side. Now, it's not to say it's not step by step, it's very step by step. But whereas our original product, which is called Social Media Ad Genius, very appropriately, was a nuts and bolts, here's how to move the levers and bells and switches and how to make things happen, we have done a much, much deeper dive teaching what we have learned in the ad agency about a lot of the psychological stuff. So today you're in for a really, really big treat because we're going to make a pretty important distinction between IQ and EQ. And if you don't know what those are, stay tuned because it's not super hard to grasp this concept. Many of you probably already know what I'm talking about. But from a standpoint of marketing, it's really, really important to understand that distinction. Now, why would I say that? Well, the reality is that number one, people don't want to be sold to. However, people love to buy and they want to feel like they're in control. Now, notice I didn't say they want to think they're in control. I said they want to feel like they're in control, right? So I chose that word intentionally because a lot of what we need to understand as marketers is how we are making our prospects feel, okay? We're not as concerned with how they think. We are more concerned about how they feel. So why am I saying that? Why am I making this distinction? Well, I'm making this distinction because from a standpoint of people getting off their butt to do something, to come to a training or to opt in for something or to buy anything that you're selling, they have to feel deep down in their gut that the time that they're going to invest is going to relay a bigger return as far as what they're going to learn, right? Or the money that they're parting with is worth it more to part with that money because of what they gain in benefits from what they are buying, right? So it's the kind of thing that, you know, you guys all understand this. We've all kind of been through this. We'll watch a sales presentation, we'll watch a video, we'll listen to a sales pitch in person, and eventually we get to that sort of like little tipping point where not only is this person starting to make a lot of sense, but they're starting to understand that we feel a certain way, and because we feel a certain way, we're going to make that decision to flip the switch to go ahead and do this thing, buy this thing, take care of this thing that needs to be taken care of. It's decision time. And that comes more from feeling than it does from logic. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't move people through logical steps. You should. And we've talked about that a number of times. But today is an important distinction because it's the difference between IQ and EQ. So, Kurt, is that enough of a, I don't want to say too much.
No, this is good. This is good. I'm making a special little update here. So you know the content that we're going to get into in a second. Can you do me a favor and just briefly describe the difference between IQ and EQ?
Okay, well, IQ, obviously, everybody knows what that stands for, intelligence quotient, right? So it's really, if you look at it and describe how does IQ manifest itself, it's really how strong a person's ability is to process information and to do some deductive logic and reasoning based on that processing. Okay, so everybody understands that that's kind of how it manifests itself. EQ is what you would call an emotional quotient, or some people will refer to it as emotional intelligence, right? And what that is a person's ability to not only feel things themselves, but also to recognize that feeling in others and to basically project possibilities of other feelings to others. So yes, there is a processing happening, but it's not happening on an intellectual or logical level, right? It's happening more on a gut feeling type of level. And it's the kind of things that would, like, for example, if somebody had a really high EQ, there would be a high likelihood that they would relate really, really well to other people. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're an introvert or an extrovert one way or another, but they probably have some really, really strong relationships. And even if they're an introvert, they're probably the kind of person that you feel really comfortable and it's really, really easy to talk to them. So that's kind of how a high EQ would manifest itself. Like, you always know people that can just walk into a room, right? And it's like there's an old idiomatic expression, like, they never met a stranger, right? So they just have that ability. I mean, Kurt, you have that ability. I mean, you're a great connector, right? So I know I give you a lot of crap about other things, but and I have a lot of fun doing that. But at the same time, you are an amazing networker and connector, right? And so you have this ability to walk into a room and make friends and relate to people and get people talking probably about some stuff that's on a much deeper level than the superficial stuff that most people would do. And your ability to do that is really great, right? Now, I don't know that necessarily, because I've only known you for a few years and I feel like I know you pretty well, but I don't know what you were like as a teenager or whatever, right? So I'm guessing, and I've seen some in, what is it, I've known you, probably 5 years or so, maybe going on 6, right? So in the time that I've known you, I would say that there has been a maturation process of your EQ in the time that I've known you. In other words, now versus 5 years ago, you are a better connector and you are better at getting to the meat of conversations now with people faster than you were 5 or 6 years ago. So the only reason I'm bringing that up is because I want people to understand that EQ is not necessarily something that you're born with. Like some people say, oh, like he's a born salesman, or, he could just walk into a room and work a room. And that's probably true of people, but the question is, how long have you known them? Like, is this something that could be developed? So, for example, most people don't, I'm older now, I'm in my 50s, but when I was in high school, I was kind of shy, right? And I'm a pretty outgoing guy, and I too have a pretty good ability to, let's just say, work a room or connect with people. I feel like I'm a pretty good connector too. I have some pretty decent communication skills, but it wasn't always like that. So these are things that developed over time, and as a result of being in the internet marketing space, being in front of a camera like I am now, just talking to the world out there on the interwebs, going to networking functions, things like that, that has made me a better communicator. That has made me a better connector. So I know that and also I've done some work on myself too, on my own issues and my own crap. And some of being able to have a high EQ is also having a healthy self-image and understanding that you do have good value and good things to bring to the world, right? Like you're not all freaked out by saying something or teaching somebody something or sharing something. Because there's always, when you're dealing with EQ as opposed to IQ, there's always an energy behind something, right? So the energy that you put out there, a lot of it comes from your deep-seated belief systems about what you're putting forward. So, if you feel strongly about what you're saying and, are confident in what you're saying, that's going to, and you could say the exact same words, but if you were a little bit on not super sure footing about what you're saying, it would not come off the same way. It would have a different energy behind it, right? It might be lacking in some of the emotional, or let's just say the proper emotional charge that it might otherwise have. So I think that's probably enough for a distinction between IQ and EQ.
That's really good. I mean, Shaky, you covered a lot of different aspects in here, and I like the way that you started this off. And there's a couple of things that I'm going to jump into here in just a second. What I'm going to have everybody do, Shaky, and by the way, can you hear me okay, or does it seem to cut out a little bit?
I hear you okay, but as soon as I talk, I'm hearing myself again, like you have two tabs open or something. Like it just started happening like 20 seconds ago.
Is that better?
Yep.
Is that a lot better?
Yep, that's a lot better.
That is because I found out that the microphone sitting right in front of the computer isn't necessarily the best place for it. So what I'm going to go ahead and just do here, just real quick, great. If you go ahead, and anybody who's watching this right now, please do me a favor to refresh your screen. So just go ahead and hit refresh. Again, go ahead and just refresh your screen. We'll be here live. We'll come right on back, but go ahead and refresh your screen. I want to show you, there'll be two different things that you'll see will show up. First of all, if you want to write any comments or like or share this while we're live, please do so. It's one of the best compliments, that we can receive from you. The other thing is, if you have any questions as we're going along, you can go ahead and type them down below. And when you do refresh the screen, if you're watching the recording, what you can do to make it really easy is just go ahead and click up in the top right-hand side over here. You'll see a little icon that comes up. It'll allow you to register. We're going to have a live training webinar this Saturday, or we'll get you on the list for our next upcoming training webinar. If you're watching the recording of this, then you'll see all the links down below in the description. So you may be wondering, and again, go ahead and refresh your screen. You'll see it'll pop up over there in that little icon. You can click the link. It'll take you over to where to register for the webinar. So here's what's really, really, really interesting, the email that we sent out. So Shecky, thanks for the longer explanation. So I met the world's 4th or 5th smartest man, depends on what chronicle you're looking at. And I hung out with him overall, I say this last weekend, but overall this last week. And he's brilliant, smarter than Einstein, supposedly, right? But what he basically said is, like I mentioned in my email, he said that humans have a 3% error rate, predictably. The 3% of the time that they're wrong. But what can throw off that error rate is emotions. You see, the TV show made about Walter O'Brien is called Scorpion. And what's really interesting is he has a really high IQ, but a really low EQ. So what he does is he really looks at the numbers, and he'll tell you directly, straight up, if he doesn't like you. I even told Shecky a story of a mutual friend who was talking to Walter, and at the end of the conversation, Walter said, "Wow, I may follow up with you, but I really just don't like you," and walked away. Now, Shecky, you're a little bit more sensitive. I am as well, too. I'd never tell anybody that. I may think that, but those words don't come out of my mouth. Now, one of the big ahas that I had over the weekend when Shecky and I were debriefing as we were going on our daily bike ride together and just kind of talking about the day, was it was really interesting because with Walter, it's just all facts. Like, there's very little emotion to it. But there came to be a point where Walter tells this story in the presentation that he's giving at this private group, and someone was asking about belief. Hey, Walter, you said that you've done these things, or when people say that they've done these things, how do we know we believe you? Now, this was a very interesting question to an intellectual, who has very high IQ and very low EQ. He's being challenged emotionally. Now, a lot of people respond by getting angry. People with high IQ are going to respond with some facts, but typically not tactful. So this is going to be very interesting. What Walter says is he basically breaks this down and he goes, it all depends on what you choose to believe. Now, I can give you lots of facts about things that I've done or that you have seen taken place. And there comes to be a certain point where either I'm going to show you a lot of facts and you're going to believe what I'm telling you as truth, or you're just going to be skeptical the entire time and never believe. It really comes down to you making a choice. And I thought that was really interesting for the fact that a lot of people tell stories in their own head of, oh my goodness, Facebook didn't work, my landing page didn't work, my targeting didn't work. What specifically didn't work? And a lot of people get really emotional and can't really kind of figure out where is the right ad or what's the right thing to do. So what they do is they stop. So what I thought was really interesting is Walter goes through a process in his head that he's actually documented into artificial intelligence. Now, here's where we go down the rabbit hole for just 30 seconds. And Shecky, stop me if this sounds confusing at all. But I think this is a really, really important thing that I want to be able to discuss with our viewers on how it can really help your ad campaigns. You know, one of the things that this Walter OBrien is really known for is writing artificial intelligence. And he basically told me, he goes, Kurt, look, he goes, I've created a program that's kind of like playing chess. It knows thousands of different variables of what would happen in an outcome of chess. Now, the average human will have over a 3% error rate, typically. Software doesn't do that, just runs zeros and ones. It's just a mathematical calculation, right? He goes, so I've built artificial intelligence to help narrow that gap of that 3% when humans are involved to make sure that, like in the military, that lives are saved, or in medically to make sure that lives are saved, or there's lots of different effects that come into is running all these different scenarios based on math. Because Shecky, you know, one of the things that we talk about a lot here is fear, right? And fear really does not happen because of a situation like death, bankruptcy, divorce. Fear happens because of the stories that we tie around the events that we experience, right? It's the stories that we tell ourselves in our head. And it's
and the stories that we tell about what the implication of that event happens for our upcoming future.
Whatever that is, we're not talking about right now. We're talking about this story happened. I'm not quite sure. It may affect me over here. I may do this. We're talking about the past and the future when Walter's right here looking at the numbers.
Right.
And that's what really impressed me. I go, wait a minute, human error is 3% or more. You created an algorithm that's a mathematical equation of essentially eliminating fear. Meaning that fear is all these stories we tell in our head. We don't know if they're true or not, but let's be honest, it scares the hell out of us, especially running ads. Spending $1,500 a month, $3,000 a month. I don't have the budget for that. What happens if I pay $3,000? My mortgage is $25,000. I'm going to pay more money on Facebook ads. And these are all stories. But what Walter does is he comes in and he uses math. And it was really interesting because when talking to him, I'm trying to think, how does he compute this logic in his head just instantly? It's just one of the gifts that he has. So one of the interesting things, Shecky, that you've been, by the way, one of the things that Walter has that I think is just amazing from the IQ versus EQ, he surrounds himself with geniuses. He actually looks all over the world for them and has different ways to locating them. Here's what's really amazing. These people with really high IQs have very low EQs. So he requires super nannies, what he calls super nannies. He hires people. He gathers all these geniuses around, and he hires these super nannies to help translate to the open world that the ideas that these geniuses have. And Shecky, really, that's what you've done for me for many, many, many years. I may go off on a tangent and have a crazy idea, but you really help me relate it and say, hey, we really have to break this down. And what we've really done is we've broken down my thought process that to me just happens instantly when I look over ads. We've documented that down into a 12-step process. So instead of this, like, for example, Walter OBrien, when he looks at a situation, he thinks of the math very quickly and the scenarios run past his brain, and he knows the next choice that he can make based off the data. What happens is a lot of people when they start running ads that I see is they get really emotional and they start creating stories in their head about what happened and what's going to happen, and they stop, and I instantly see the math. But Shecky, one of the things that you've asked me for years is you're like, we got to write this down. I know it's in your head. I know we've explained it, but we got to write this down. And that's what Shecky and I had spent and Nick, well over 140 days, I think at this point, documenting the entire thought process. So what happens is if you have a high EQ, if you really care about your product and service and you know it can help people and that you can monetize from it, great. The artificial intelligence of Facebook is going to help you with the targeting to help eliminate some of that 3% error rate. See, because what happens is when our EQ starts looking at our business and we get passionate about our business, Nick was just doing research on this, our businesses really grow. They grow a lot, but we got to have some IQ behind it as well too. But if we allow our emotions to overcompensate our simple math skills, we will tell ourselves stories that don't exist that will always cause us not to be able to move forward. But outlining this 12-step process, wow. Now people, from what I think about instantly, can walk through the exact process that, and I know Shecky, you had this a second, but Shecky, let's be honest, some of the early case studies that we've had, I mean, not early case studies, these are just case studies we relate to scale because we've been doing this exact same process for years. I just didn't write it down. We're seeing amazing results, and that's how we get to meet some of these people. It's just, Shecky, go ahead. You want to make a point. I'm very, very, very excited about this training we're going to have on Saturday.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, obviously we started off talking about this distinction between EQ and IQ. So for the people that are sitting out there, whether you're watching this live or on a recording, you have to think about it this way, right? Your EQ, you want to use when you're creating the psychological angles for your ads. You want to get in the head and especially the heart of your prospect, right? That's when your EQ comes into play. Like how can you create the kind of content that's going to be like super relatable and touch people on an emotional level, okay? So it is important to use your IQ. However, that said, you want to throw out your EQ for everything else. Like, don't get freaked out about a campaign that's performing or not performing the way it should. Don't get freaked out about, you know, you have certain expectations about the way you think things are supposed, or you feel things are supposed to turn out, and they don't, right? So one of the beauties of the way that we train is, like you say, there's a complete elimination of fear when you can bring things just to your IQ. In other words, like, look, here's the thing. If you were driving in your car, right, and you passed by a speed limit sign that said 55, and you happen to look down at your speedometer because you just happened to drive by a 55 mile an hour sign, right, and your speedometer says you're doing 68. Now you're not going to go, oh my God, I got to stop the car. Like, you're not going to do that, right? You're not.
You don't
right?
pull up an emergency.
All you're going to do is you're either going to you're going to go like, okay, I don't really want to get a ticket from the cops, so I'm going to back off on the gas pedal just a little bit, right? Take it down to like 62 and maybe flip the cruise control on, and I'm good. Like, there's no emotion in that. It's just a quick snap, you know, intelligent decision to say, you know, I don't want this outcome of a ticket, so I'm going to make a slight adjustment based on this metric that I just looked at. There's zero emotion in that behavior. So that's a pretty good analogy of the same thing. But what happens with a lot of newer advertisers or people, here's the analogy, they don't understand that the speed limit's 55. They have no clue. So they look down and they're like, I don't know what the speed limit is. Should I go 65? Should I go 40? Whatever. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So now I'm going to pull over, right? And now they're going nowhere.
Well, in that same analogy, let's just talk about cars, right? This is something that I've become to appreciate as I grow much older. But let's be honest, a really good mechanic, they're just tracing logic, right? They're like, look, this means this and this means this. So for example, if you're driving and all of a sudden your car starts to putter, and we all know people like this, right? If you haven't done this in your own, even the same thing about like your own health, right? It's puttering down the road and you see a check engine light. And the first thing is like, okay, can I make it far enough to the garage? It's a check engine light, which honestly, it doesn't really tell you anything, right? It means your gas cap could be open if you have a newer car. But you're like, oh my goodness, I don't have the money until payday. I don't have $600 to fix something with the engine. Maybe I just shouldn't drive it. Maybe I should drive it. I don't know. Maybe I should get it towed. Like, I don't even know like how far it is, the tow thing. Like, crap, that's maybe $300, could be $75. I don't have AAA anymore. And there's all these stories that go on. Now, Shecky's worked around cars for his entire life, so Shecky may just be like, yeah, sometimes if you turn the car on and back off and just make sure your gas cap is tight because you just filled it up with gas, you don't have anything else to worry about. He knows all the assessments. Yeah, like I remember getting a brand new truck like that. It was a brand new SUV. Check engine light came on, and I'm like, what the heck? And I took it in, and I've kind of, you're right, I've learned a lot more about EQ over the years, right? Stuff like that. But I was mad at the dealer. I'm like, how do I have a check engine light? Like, I mean, I just bought the car, and I go into this whole story of how I just bought the car. I don't understand why we broke. It shouldn't be broke. You should have customer service. Why does this not work? And the guy's just like, maybe next time you should ask your girlfriend because you forgot to put the gas cap back on. And I'm like, I didn't know what facts to check, and I felt like an idiot. So what happens is we see so many times as people make up all these stories. Shecky, you had a great analogy of going 55 miles an hour down the road. And then all of a sudden you're like, uh-oh, do I stop? Do I start? What do I do? And that's it. They just stop. So what I've been very, very passionate about really for the last 100 and some days, I think it's close to 150 days now, Shecky, is outlining a 12-step process, step by step, where you can check your numbers, where you can remove a lot of that fear and know exactly where to grow. You know, a lot of people get scared because a Facebook button may move or a strategy may change a little bit. But if you really watch the entire ecosystem, the way that everything works together, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Twitter, they're all using the same type of information to target people. The targeting is a little bit different, but how to target. How to target, we're targeting people emotionally, right? We're targeting people's really their IQ and their EQ, but we're relating to their feelings. What are they interested in? Now, the best way to reach our avatar is to make sure that we set up in step one, like we talk about the scale method, is we really want to make sure that we know exactly who our avatar is, because the artificial intelligence will close that 3% error gap of how we advertise, and you'll advertise to the direct right people as long as you know who your avatar is and you follow that 12-step process where we quantify the entire process. So I think it's interesting. Like Shecky, for example, is being a mechanic, right? I don't know much about cars. I don't know about you working on cars, but I remember watching a documentary about these Aborigine people living out on the water on these boats. And I'm thinking, I don't know anything about mechanics, but this guy just used a motor, some fishing string, a little bit of duct tape they found on a beach, a water bottle to help make a gas tank to make sure that this boat can continue to keep on moving. And I'm thinking, these people have no excuses or stories to say we're broke, we're poor, we can't fix it. They figured out a way logically to figure out what resources do we have around us to make it work. And that's how they survive. And it's like, it's very interesting. Let's be honest, Shecky, fear in like the military will get you killed, right?
Well, it's not just that. Like, it's interesting that you talk about, let's just call it the 3% rule, right? So if we know that there's this human margin of error of 3%, that's obviously at a flat emotional level, right? Like that's just on, based on an intellect. So we know that we can reduce that if we take the emotion out. However, the reverse is also true. So when you increase the emotion, AKA fear, unknown, whatever, that number is going to go up beyond 3%. So if you really want to screw up your marketing and screw up your chances of success, I've got the perfect formula for you. Just freak out and continue to stay freaked out.
Yeah.
And I promise you'll screw it up.
Hey, Nick, are you on the line, by the way? Could you message me on Skype if you don't mind? I believe that you're online. What's really interesting, Nick, is if you could do me a favor, because Shecky and I are going to talk about this for another 30 minutes. Let me see if you're still on here. I believe that you are. Let's see here. Can you... So basically, Nick, what we did is I just sent out an email that I told everybody that the call was going to be at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, but I set it at 2. It was actually at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. So if you could resend out, yeah, saw the wrong time. Okay, perfect. We are actually live. now. So, whoops. Well, you know, the other thing, Shecky, that we find out on a very regular basis is sometimes, unfortunately, I make a mistake. So there's a lot of people on the call right now that are coming in and out, and they know the regular times, and it looks like we're just gonna have a bunch of people that are gonna join us right now, which is gonna be great. This is great. Ooh, wow, we're getting lots of emails about IQ versus EQ right now. That's very interesting. So Nick's gonna send that back out here in just a second. Sorry. You know, it's interesting, Shecky, because one of the things is, you know, I'm very, very, very passionate about is how can we help as many entrepreneurs as possible look at their business in a very simple mathematical way where it removes some of the fear so they can really start to grow their business. We don't know all the right answers, but if you figure out 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 2 is 4, well, I put in $4 and I only made 2, that's not good math, right? But like we train in the 12-step process, the scale method we're going to talk about more this weekend, you always have an opportunity to follow up with people as long as you're targeting the right people. So what we only have to do as marketers is we just have to figure out who's our perfect avatar. What content do they like to read and see? That's it. The artificial intelligence of Facebook, Google, YouTube, or whatever will figure out everything else. So all we have to do is figure out who's our avatar and what content do they like. That's it. Really, Shecky, if we break down online advertising for Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Twitter, right? If we break that all down, that's all we're doing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, besides simple math, all we have to do as marketers is qualify the avatar and figure out what content do they like. And we can either find that from researching sites like FB Karma, for example, right? We can either, what's the other one that we always recommend? It's FB Karma, and there's
BuzzSumo.
BuzzSumo. There's all these different places where you can find out what do people generally like who are underneath your keywords, or you can write some blogs and test with traffic. But once you know the right audience, and once you know the right content, sometimes content takes a little bit while, but as long as you're qualifying the right avatar, step number 1, you can always retarget to different content.
Well, and that could be said too, is you can also outsource that too. So I know that there's some people that are not super strong writers, but there's all kinds of, you know, like article writing and content creating services out there. And you say, hey, look, you know, I'll just use your word. I'm marketing to mechanics. It's only in my head because you said that, but just to use it hypothetically, I'm marketing to mechanics, you know, and if you go to, you know, outsource the creation of content for mechanics, many of those companies already have experience writing and creating content for that niche, right? So yes, you have to pay them money to get the content, right? But they already have a pretty good idea because of the experience and what they've been doing for a long time, how to do that. So again, it's just another area where you don't necessarily have to freak out. You can just logically keep yourself moving forward. You know, some people, like I feel like I'm a pretty decent writer, and, you know, I can take some of the emotional stuff that comes out of your head, Kurt, and turn it into, you know, something that's pretty, you know, easily digestible and understandable. Yeah, right. But there's other people that just like they're great at what they do, but they're not great at the printed word or whatever, right? So, in any case, play to your strengths, right? You know, we talk to people all the time. I'll give you another for instance. Like, I'm really good at the angles and the psychology and some of the things we talked about, kind of more addressing the EQ of what our prospects and customers are like. And Kurt, you're like the master of like looking at numbers, right? You know, you're definitely more on the IQ side of our marketing effort. I'm probably more on the EQ side of our marketing effort of what goes out to people from our company, right? Because you're just kind of one of these guys that can look at it and go, okay, I'm like a mechanic. If this thing is broken, it could only be one of these 4 metrics, right? It's like process of elimination, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things for, I was just answering a question. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them down in the comments. And hey, if you're really interested in this subject, like I said, we're hosting a special live webinar this Saturday. You can find all that information by clicking in the little icon right up over here, or everything you're going to see here down below. So, Shecky, someone was just asking here the difference between IQ, EQ, men and women, and they were saying, hey, great analogy. You know, let's talk about this just for a second on a couple of things that you addressed as well too.
Yeah, sure. Somehow one of your settings, your sound just got really fuzzy.
Okay. Just a moment.
So I don't know what you changed there, but
How's that?
it's the same.
Okay, just one moment, please. I'm going to make a quick little adjustment. Just one more moment. Sounds like a loose cord.
The joys of technology. Now we can't hear you. You've gone quiet, Kurt. Can't hear you. No. So I guess you can hear me, but we can't hear you. So whatever you did, you got to fix that. Unless you want to type the rest of what you want to say. Still can't hear you, brother. All right. Anyway, I could hear you saying the words "good job." I'm a good lip reader. Anyway, while you're fixing that, I think I can probably answer the question about somebody was talking about male versus female and EQ and IQ on males and females. And it's a good, I don't know, now I'm seeing waiting for people to join the call. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Okay.
Now you're clear.
So Nick was right. That's why I have a brilliant business partner. He was right. There was a little loose cord that jiggled itself loose as I was standing over here kind of dancing around. So that's very, very interesting. So let's talk, Shecky, I want to address a couple of points that you mentioned. One of the things is you said that I have a little bit higher IQ on addressing the numbers. You know, one of the things that I like to tell people over and over and over, this is no more than 5th grade math. I can recognize some patterns that I see in numbers, but I don't even understand algebra. Like X plus Y equals Z2, is that right? Like, it just confuses the heck out of me when someone says that. So it's not hard math. It just, for me, is this is factual. This is factual. The next step is factual. And all I know is I don't beat myself up. Shecky knows this about me. And I don't sit here and say, why did this go wrong? We didn't do this. All we know is, hey, we tried to do a webinar. We only had 10 people show up. But out of the 10 people that showed up, here's what we did, because these are just factual numbers. I can't get involved in a story that I don't have facts behind it. And that's the only thing that I really want to be able to communicate to students and say, look, if you follow a factual story of what happened, you know, like a mechanic, that's why we created the 12-step process, what step along the way needs to be tweaked. Now, I want to talk about the difference. I'm very passionate about this. I want to talk about the difference between IQ and EQ in men versus women. Now, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm just going to repeat some information that I heard from a good friend who is brilliant and a certified expert. I thought this was very important. It helped me understand some things in marketing that I just, wow. So here's what I asked her. There's a girl that we've worked with, and actually I can say her name, Susan Sly. Susan Sly is a top network marketing earner in a company called Isogenics. She's beautiful. She's brilliant. She's passionate. And she just has just an amazing story of someone who has MS that runs multiple marathons a year because of her nutrition. She's an amazing individual. Well, she's helped lots of people in her company go on to make hundreds of thousands and even millions of dollars. She studied psychology. She's worked in prisons. She's worked with the lowest of the low or the highest of the high. And a lot of people she works with is females. Now, a friend of mine, a friend of ours, Shecky Jesse Jameson, asked me a question. He goes, Kurt, will you ask Susan, why are there so many men in network marketing and so many men and women, especially women in network marketing, but men leaders? But the women leaders are super powerful. Like, they outrate the men huge. But there's a lot more men who are in the leadership positions, but when the women perform, they're just, outperforming men completely. And Susan goes, that's a really interesting question that you ask. She goes, and she goes, there are 1,000 times as many strands between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of a female's brain. Not just 1,000 strands, like 1,000 times the connections that men have emotionally. And she goes, what's interesting is and I'll never forget what she said. She goes, we'll be cooking dinner and thinking about what are we going to wear to our niece's bridal shower? What's the present going to look like? What's it going to be wrapped in? What are our kids going to be dressed in? What time are we going to get there? She goes, we even think about all these different processes even during sex. She goes, but I'll tell you, a lot of females and a lot of women will think in consequences depending on how they were raised. And that is, if I spend time on my business, I am not spending time on, and then they think in consequences. You can't quantify consequences. Your only feeling is attached to fear or hope of, I hope this turns out well, but I can't spend my time on this because this may happen. And what Susan does is Susan helps her female leaders on her team and inside of her company focus on, hey, look, because you're a mother and a strong just woman, period, and you're a family, you're matrix for the family, you take care of the family. If we can take all that energy and really focus into just a half an hour, a 45-minute time slot, and not worry about consequences and fear, just focus on the facts of business, she goes, I'll change your life. And I've seen her help hundreds, and not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds and thousands of people get past their own thought process in their head. Having EQ can be great. I just posted an article below, down in the comments. Having EQ can actually make you more money than just IQ. But it's really important to realize when we're running our ad campaigns, not to get emotionally involved in just the numbers. It's great to be emotional and passionate about your product. Negativity sets in when you start telling yourself about these concepts of fear. But what's really interesting is 12-step process. We show you really quickly, step by step, how to eliminate this entire process. I mean, really, Shecky, we always have you do definitions. Shecky, what's the definition of an algorithm? How would you explain an algorithm to someone who's never heard that name before? What exactly is an algorithm?
Well, this is just my words. I'm not looking it up. I would say that an algorithm is a mathematical calculation designed to create a certain outcome.
Is it based on fear or facts?
It's just based on data. Data is facts, but yeah, but I look at that, it's sort of almost beyond facts. It's just like hard data. It's like, this is exactly what is going on, right? How can we take what is going on and first, there's a couple steps to an algorithm. First, quantify what is going on, right? So let's just say this is what's happening numerically, and then qualify what's going on, saying this is what's happening numerically. These are the trends now that we're seeing, right? And then the third thing is results driven. So how can we take the quantity and the quality and turn that into a calculation that serves our own good? Like if we want to, get better audiences or write better ads or do whatever the heck it is we want to do with that data, an algorithm is designed to serve us. It's a calculation that's there designed to create a certain result, but it has to do a couple steps first.
So it's very interesting, and thank you for that explanation, Shecky. So what a lot of people don't realize is inside of Facebook, compliance, what people like on ads, what they don't like on ads, it's all driven by the artificial intelligence. So I remember trainings a couple of years ago when they're like, put a red line around all of your ads. It helps them stand out more. And now ads get declined for that. Why? Well, because the artificial intelligence of just numbers has decided that from all the thousands of people who have clicked on ads like that, people don't like those kinds of ads. They don't click on them anymore. So what happens is the rules of Facebook, as you all know, are always changing. And why are they changing? Because this mathematical equation is looking at such these huge chunks of data with Facebook's 1.6+ billion users, and they can instantaneously look at statistical data. I get a lot of questions, and I just recently got one in the Genius Society. Kurt, one is significant data significant? Meaning, hey, I got 10 people to fill out a survey. Is that good? Well, I wouldn't bet on a stock that performed for 10 days in a row, but if that stock performed for over 200 days in a row, has a pretty good probability that it's because I have enough data. I have over 100 or 200. How many times can I see it repeatable? Because Facebook has such mass data, they can literally take the news feed, let's just imagine it like this, and they can take the news feed and make it like that for 5 or 7 seconds and have thousands of people engage with that new format. They can instantly see what people like and what they don't, and easily see some of the trends. So see, what happens is when we focus on our avatar and we focus on good content, the algorithm of these platforms will figure out the best targeting. They'll figure out exactly who to target at the right time, and with our retargeting, we can make up a lot of opportunity. It's just really important we focus on who our avatar is and understanding the simple math. If you focus on the avatar and you get really scared about the math and you just stop your ads, Shecky, I think that's probably the best analogy that you've had so far on that, is driving down the highway, you're doing 65, and all of a sudden you look up and it's 55. You literally do not pull the emergency brake, pull over to the side of the road, freak out, not do anything. You just look around, you're like, okay, hope I didn't get caught. Let's go ahead and slow it down just a little bit, make an adjustment, and it's fine. So a lot of the times as we're telling people to start out with ad sets of $5 a day, where you may be testing 5 or 10 different ad sets at $25 or $50 a day, it's just to get enough information. 100 clicks. 100 clicks, I got a pretty good idea what's probable. 200 clicks, pretty good idea. Brian Johnson, which we'll give you updates on Saturday of how well things are going. He's in his best week online ever. That was last week. Well, we've gotten over 13,000 clicks to his websites. So that's all probable data. All we're looking for is the consistency. Where can we find consistency in the data to make really good decisions? Now, Shecky, you've purchased a lot of other programs, and obviously I love to brag about Social Media Ad Genius, and I love to brag about the scale method. And again, whether you watch this recording and it's a week from now or 4 weeks from now, we're always going to have information right up over here. If you just click on, you'll see exactly where to go, or be put on our VIP list. Nick, that reminds me, by the way, the last time we did a webinar, I think was almost a month ago at this point. I think there's still a VIP list that we have based on a month ago. What's that? Back in July.
I'm kind of itching to do another one.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I mean, we typically do these during the week. We got some feedback. We're gonna do one on this. We're gonna do one this upcoming weekend, just because. I mean, from what I learned on top of the mountain with Walter and another 110 entrepreneurs from around the world that are just brilliant, I want to share that information. And quite honestly, I took Brian Johnson's case study, Shecky, at some of these places on top of this private mountain that a bunch of entrepreneurs bought, and I took some screenshots, and I'm like, hey, look what we're doing on Facebook right now. And people are like, oh my. How? And I go, it's easy. It's a 12-step process. Now, some of these guys paid $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 to come out to the event. And I'm like, look, for who you are and what we're doing, I'll just give you access to the course. You see it for yourself. I'm already starting to get feedback of like, now I understand how fast your brain works. You've documented out the whole process. So I know exactly how to think through. My goal is very similar to what my jiu-jitsu coach says, Macau. This is great. One time we were sparring, and we were with our mutual friend, Shecky, David Gonzalez, and we're sparring, and David gets stuck in this move. And he looks over at the coach, and he goes, Coach, what do I do next? What do I do next? Our coach came unglued. He went ballistic. And he goes, I failed as a coach is in the heat of battle if you have to turn to me and ask me what to do next. I failed you somewhere. I failed you in not knowing what to choose next. I'm sorry, David, I failed you. Or you chose not to give you the information that I gave you and you were just looking for help. And it kind of made me think for a second, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I want to make sure, and this is what we have in our 12 steps, is to make sure that you have all the information so you can choose. So at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're looking at your Facebook ads, you know the 3 things to change. So when you wake up in the morning, you can see the exact results. So if you want to change to ad creatives, oh, in the morning I get a check and see, oh, I've gotten 200 clicks. I can make a logical decision. So Shecky, we talk a lot about the IQ and EQ, and I think this Saturday I'm really passionate about it. And again, you guys can register on the top right-hand side there or down below. Really, if we think about it, I mean, Facebook, let's just talk about Facebook for a second. Their algorithm, what they know and what they can do, it's brilliant. As marketers, we actually have one of the easiest jobs in history as long as we know how to track the math. I mean, you've owned multiple businesses over the years. Have you ever seen a platform where you can have this much targeting and have people have this little of marketing experience and still do very well online?
No, it's effing awesome. And it's interesting to me that people will just do the whole, mud against the wall theory. They'll just throw an ad up, and they're not. You said something earlier that I thought was really, really powerful about just really there's only really two things that we need to get good at, right? Number one is defining our audience, right? And then number two is understanding what language that audience is going to resonate with. I mean, that's kind of my version of what you said, right? So if you think about it, when you start looking, like, for example, using Facebook as an example, if you go into their tool called Audience Insights, right? I mean, you can pick around and click on different headings and subheadings, and it's like, hey, if I want to advertise, to talking ducks only in the state of Minnesota, right, I can do that. Like, they give you such incredibly sharp tools to carve out the slice of the population that you're trying to go after, whether it's based on interests or whether it's based on demographics, whatever it is, it's pretty flippin' amazing, right? And we talk to a lot of people that come on board with us as students, and they go, well, my audience is women over 35. Well, that's great, but, like, you're selling yoga mats, okay? I'm sorry, but that's not every woman over 35, right? Like, maybe these are people that are interested in physical fitness. Maybe these are people that are interested in meditation. Maybe they're interested in spirituality, right? Maybe they're interested in athletic clothing. I don't know, right? So it's, but when you can start dialing that stuff in and they give you the tools to be able to find those women, right? It's like, God, this is just awesome. So, and then you spend a little time doing some testing with just proper metrics without emotion and say, okay, look, I'm going to put some emotional messaging out there that gets people to take action. But on my side, I'm not going to be emotional. I'm just going to look and see what works and what doesn't. Which of these pieces of content, which kind of language are they resonating with, right? Like, those are the only really two things you have to get good at. And the first one's super easy. The second one, granted, takes a little time and some testing and things like that. But the first one, like just carving up your interest groups and that sort of stuff, they give you all the tools to do that. So once you've got that, like, that's your foundation, right? Everything after that, you can leverage off of their artificial intelligence and tools and retargeting, and like, it's gotten so much easier. But here's the kind of the irony or the paradox in all of this is, as technology progresses and as platforms like Facebook and some of the others give us these tools, right, we start as advertisers getting bombarded. Or now you can do this, now you can do that, now you can do this. So many students, many advertisers will look at that and go, oh my God, this is so freaking intimidating, right? But what they're failing to recognize is they just gave you a sharper knife, right? Like, this is the irony in all of this. It's like, some of us will look at it and go, dude, this is awesome, right? Look what you can do now, right? It's 3 little switches. It takes like 5 minutes to learn it, right? Other people will go, oh my God, they'll just get into like this overwhelm mode. So, and again, this is the difference between people that are using their IQ or using their EQ when they're looking at that evolution of technology, right? So I would challenge anybody that's watching this to say, you probably we all have some elements of IQ and EQ. Some of us are more smarter intellectually, some of us are more smarter emotionally, but the challenge here is to say, when and where are you going to use those strengths, right? And when you start freaking out, is it worth taking a breath and going, which intelligence am I using right now? Because I probably should not be using my emotional intelligence right now. I should be using my intellectual intelligence for this one.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Your mortgage company, Chase, they don't care about your story. They really don't. They're going to report to your credit agency every 30 days if you're late. They looked over, they don't care who you know, how important you are in social class, if they're going to give you a loan to a house. They don't. Now, the tough thing is for someone like Chase, if you want to say tough, as they make billions of dollars a year, is when people come in and start telling the teller's stories. My sister's aunt's cousin's uncle died, and I had to pay for the funeral. Then my dog ate my mortgage bill, and I wasn't able to pay it. And the people at the other end of the counter, the only thing they can say is, I'm sorry, because they emotionally can't change what the numbers or the actuaries who have the high IQs have come up with, right? They just can't. Yeah. That's it. And it's all based on facts. And let's be honest, facts aren't necessarily fair. But what we do is when we look at our advertising and we say, we've had 100 results, 100 views, or 1,000 views. Now that's quantifiable. And all we have to do, and this is why Shecky and I have spent so much time quantifying all of this, all we have to do is say, okay, what step am I on with the 12-step process? I've never advertised before. Well, then let's start taking a look at your avatar. Okay, great. Now that we know your avatar, our avatar may change over time depending on what we're doing, right? Not a problem. But this is something that's really important that I want you to think about. I've talked to people in the past and they've said, Kurt, I got this idea for this business. And the idea for the business is A. But then I'm going to do this B. And then this other thing I'm going to do is C. And then this other thing I'm going to do is D. And I go, that's great. Does A, B, C, and D all link together for the same customer, same avatar? They go, no, these are 4 or 5 different avatars and different products. And then what they do is they start fan pages advertising to this one avatar, but then later they advertise about this other product to this one avatar they targeted because they already had a list. But then when they sent an email to that list, that didn't really work out. They're not really quite sure if it was the promotion or the avatar. We have to keep everything very congruent. So we created a 12-step process. So when you start a process, number 1, you're thinking about your avatar. The next step is we're talking about targeting. The next step is we start talking about how we're going to retarget. And at any time, if something breaks, we just look at that step. We go back 1. Did we implement this? Yes. What can we check to make sure it's quantifiable? We have numbers for you. You move to the next step. Okay. Did this work? Yes or no? What are the numbers? Do I need to improve or do I need to move to the next step? Now, for me, just the way that I look at ads, instantly I can look at an ad within, I shouldn't say instantly, within a couple of seconds reviewing ads, I can pretty much tell what's going on over the last 30 days. Very, very, very quickly. Very quick assessment. It's just, I've looked at lots of numbers. Now what we've done is we've taken that thought process, my IQ, and written it down step by step. So you can say, okay, I don't know if this worked. Let me see what I can adjust to see if it gets a little bit better. Because let me give you a great example, and we'll talk about this case study more on Saturday. Brian Johnson gets 9-cent website clicks. That's super cheap. 9 cents. That's amazing. But Shecky, you always say this too. 9-cent website clicks, unless you're getting what, it doesn't matter.
I want a sale.
Yeah, gotta have sales. Well, Brian has an 11% opt-in rate. Should be 20 to 25. But at 11%, he gets $2 leads. If we're just to change the opt-in where it's 20%, now it's dollar leads. That's changing one thing. That's not saying, why am I only getting 10%? Let's shut everything down. No. We know who we quantified. We know who we started to target. We know who we retargeted. We know who likes the page. We know what content that they like. They just didn't opt into, wait a minute, they've already been through 5 experiences and I just haven't got this one right. Well, since we're retargeting and Brian has weekly events and weekly call to actions and he's selling something weekly and he has splinter offers, 11, And number 12, he's using the artificial intelligence to keep following up with these right people in the first 10 steps. It's quantifiable. It works all the time. Brian's a perfect example. And that's why I talk about his case study all the time of, wow, here are the exact numbers for a like, a video, a retarget, an engagement, a website click, and then Brian does a new event. If his sales funnel doesn't perform through his email follow-up, he always knows what he's going to do for retargeting. If his retargeting is not working, and retargeting for opt-ins not working, and retargeting for sales page isn't working, well, once a week, Brian has a new event, just like we teach as well, to make up for that opportunity. Right now, as Shecky already knows with Brian, momentum has set in such a huge way. He had his best week online last week. The week before that was his best week online. Week before that was his best week online.
Awesome.
Now it just builds.
And he's a great guy. He deserves it. And the one of the things that I think is great about Brian is from the standpoint of, we always like to give examples of our students. But one of the things we talk about, and I don't remember in which step we talk about it, I think it's somewhere in like 8 or 9 in the recorded training, that we talk about the snowball effect. And everybody understands that terminology, right? But, just based on doing some good things patterned consistently over time so that you're leveraging off of the stuff that you've done cumulatively, right? But, just the last few months. Doing some good. Now I'm echoing.
You're okay.
Okay. Anyway, but so that's great. So he's starting to experience the snowball effect, and it's really, really great to see. So I know we're like kind of over the hour, so I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, one more time, as you guys are all taking a look at this, we've been talking a lot about IQ and EQ and how we make sure, as long as we're really studying the right numbers, we can have just some amazing things that start to happen inside of our ads. So if you haven't already done so, go ahead and click on the it's the little annotation icon, or it's actually called the card up at the top right-hand side of the video. When you click on that, you'll register for the IQ versus EQ. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how do we remove some of the emotion from making decisions in our ads, turning it into just pure numbers. Because we turn it into just pure numbers, I say this all the time, 1 + 1 is not scary, 3 + 3 is not scary. Once we have facts, it's perfectly fine to be able to move ahead. So this is a live presentation we're going to do this Saturday, 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. You probably want to budget us anywhere from 60 minutes to 90 minutes for us to go through the 12-step process, how to turn that emotional quotient that it is your given gift about your product or service, how to turn that into a number so you can easily predict your traffic as well. So other than that, we had some questions down below that I answered. Again, any other questions you have while watching this recording, just do me a favor. Go ahead and put the questions down in the comment section below. And if you want to know more, I put a link down in the very bottom down there in the description, is you can choose your own experience that will take you step by step through our 12-step process to understand even more of what the scale method is, so you have some extra training and some extra insight when you show up for our webinar this Saturday. Other than that, Shecky, that's all I got. I really appreciate the conversation. As you know, I was gone for a week up on top of this mountain hanging out with some really smart people, and I love sharing this information to really help business owners scale their business as well. So, Shecky, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, man, my favorite bike rides are the ones right when you come back from a mastermind, because there's always good stuff and juicy things to share. So, man, I appreciate you, brother, and thanks for sharing and for all your wisdom, and I'm really looking forward to Saturday.
Absolutely. I'll see everybody else. Remember, make sure to go ahead and register here or register down on below. We look forward to seeing you on the live presentation this Saturday. Thanks, everybody. Take care.